The Rompers, fashion of the future.
Is your meat manly?
And is masculinity toxic? Coming up today on The Point. Hello and welcome to The Point, the only talk show bringing gay and straight men together to see what happens. And Doug is still illin'. He's still... What? He's not feeling well.
He's illin'?
Illtown.
He's in Illtown.
He's sick.
He's illmatic.
He's sick.
No.
No. Anyway, Doug's not here, and Matt's still not here because he's
Nobody's
doing
here.
his show. No, we're here. And Tegan is back with us.
I'm like family now.
I know. And we have a special guest co-host today. I want to call him a cultural anthropologist, but he tells me I can't quite say that because he's a PhD candidate.
Not yet.
In
Soon,
cultural,
hopefully.
So he's a cultural anthropologist of the future, Kevin Nixon. Welcome,
Hi, everybody.
Kevin?
And we wanted to have you on because it's actually a topic that we've been talking about, really delving into for a while, and it's the issue of masculinity and how it affects people and their lives. Your areas of expertise are on sexuality, masculinity, but also drag culture, which I find fascinating because it's kind of seen as sort of the opposite of masculinity. But you kind of went undercover as a drag queen, did you not?
I did a little bit, yeah. I'm an anthropologist, so we do participant observation. So I actually became a drag queen for a little while. I didn't do a very good job.
What was your drag name?
It was Roxy Cox originally, and then I moved to Toronto, and Safanda Cox is a huge drag queen down here, so I was like, obviously I can't use that name. So I changed it to Fox, but I didn't perform much as a drag queen in Toronto, more in other areas of Southern Ontario, but I did do it a little bit, and it was mainly just to sort of walk in their heels, I guess, for lack of a better term.
what did you learn from your research?
Oh my gosh, most of my research looked at performative politics. So the kinds of questions I was looking at are, is drag transgressive of social norms? Like what kind of meanings are transmitted through drag performance? So when people are watching it, what do they take away from it? And so I looked at things like racial politics, looked a little bit at social class, gender, sexuality, and I was really interested in the Canadian context. So I also compared that to things like multiculturalism, Canadian citizenship. And so I kind of come at masculinity studies from a very odd angle, as you mentioned. It's not my area of focus. Most of my research has been on femininity, actually, and how that's sort of manifested in drag performance, expressed and identified with. But you can't really study the feminine without looking at masculinity. And one of the interesting things for me, as an anthropologist, when I was doing interviews with drag queens, was just how often this issue of masculinity or moving away from masculinity and some of the stigma associated with that, even for queer, bisexual, and gay men, how that came up. You know, and I can't count the number of times in interviews with queens, I get to a line of questioning, often having a lot to do with like relationships, friendships, dating, where I'd have a lot of informants who were in tears basically saying, you know, gay men don't want to date us because we're too feminine.
But drag queens they're only in drag for the performance. So when they're out of drag,
Some, yeah, for sure. And a lot of people, it's just a performative thing where they're in it for the performance, and when they're off stage, they're presenting in a male, masculine manner, identifying as male outside of the performance context. There are a lot of trans women, though, who also perform in drag shows. So it's not just all cisgender, gay, bisexual, and queer men. There's a lot of diversity in the community. And so some people, their drag persona is carried into their daily lives. You know, some people identify as a queen off stage. Some people will dress in drag.
Well, Tito identifies as a queen all the time.
True.
Yeah, it's not necessarily limited to that context. And so it is something that can sometimes carry stigma for some of the queens. And so some people had a lot of difficulty meeting people because there's sort of this valorization of masculinity within the queer community. And even more broadly speaking, I mean, we kind of have at least within European and American cultures, especially in Canada, the US, we have sort of this hierarchy in place where masculinity is sort of placed on top, and anything that's considered feminine is sort of considered hierarchically inferior.
Well, and of course, you use the word on top. I mean, being top is still seen as the masculine.
It's often gendered as masculine.
Yeah.
You know, and so my research has really looked at that gender play and drag and how that relates to the wider politics within a Canadian context.
Wow, fascinating. Well, that brings us to our first talking point. It's a man's world. And in fact, it's interesting that you put it in a somewhat political context, because I was struck by this article. Granted, it's a right-wing website called Economic Collapse. But the headline was, during the Trump era, will men finally start acting like men again? And it makes the argument that the reason why Trump won is because Americans, I mean, granted, 3 million more voted for Hillary, and of course sexism played a role in that race. But a lot of people who supported Trump did it because he embodies this idea of masculinity, I would argue, in a sort of retro way. But you know, he's that typical guy, you know, as opposed to Obama, who was seen as more feminine.
In comparison, I guess.
I mean, Obama, right? He got in trouble because he ate arugula. You know,
What? He got in trouble for what?
well,
What are we
the right
talking
wing
about?
went after him because he liked.
Greens.
Yes.
That's so stupid.
I'm curious what your perspective is as that race unfolded. How you think sexism and the way masculinity and femininity is portrayed, how that came out in the presidential race?
For sure. I think that's a great question. Like, I think definitely ideas around masculinity and masculinity being seen as superior played into that presidential race for sure. I mean, Trump is playing on, like you said, this kind of retro masculinity, this kind of very traditional, what we academics sometimes call like a more hegemonic form of masculinity, a really dominant form that's kind of
Hegemonic.
very sexy word.
Yes. Say it again.
Well, yeah, hegemonic. But it's this dominant form that seems to, it's often very racialized as white, it's able-bodied, it's gender normative. It's very what we consider kind of a traditional masculinity.
Even the way he treats his wife, Melania, is very,
For sure.
it seems dismissive, as opposed to Barack Obama and the way he treats Michelle, which is very loving and caring.
Well, she's been dismissing him lately, and I love it.
Who? Oh, Melania. Yeah, get your hand off me. Yeah.
So good.
But yeah, I think it definitely plays into this kind of dominant masculinity in American society. And I think Trump is playing right into those cards through this kind of rejection of anything associated with femaleness, femininity, and the regulation of that. I mean, you've got people like Trump and American politicians kind of trying to get their hands in, you know, women's reproductive rights and abortion issues. And it's again this kind of return to a very heteronormative and potentially very oppressive form of masculinity.
Now, when you say an oppressive form of masculinity, what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that I think confuses people, even my students, when I'm teaching gender studies classes, is that there's masculinity and there's femininity, and that's it. First of all, I think we have to do away with this binary concept. There's lots of different forms of gendered embodiment and expression. And we also have this idea that there is one type of masculinity. There may be a type of masculinity that we see in the West that's very dominant. But I think there are lots of different types of masculinities, subcultural forms, racialized forms of masculinity, those associated with social class. So it's more like we should be talking about masculinities and not masculinity in the singular. But I think we do have a dominant form that is very patriarchal, very heteronormative, and can be quite oppressive. And as I said before, it's often marked as white, able-bodied, upper class, you know, maybe around certain things like body fascism, you know, having a certain type of body type. I mean, we certainly see that within queer communities for sure, even here in Toronto.
You mentioned that there's a racial component to that. Now, this is a white version of masculinity, but often you see in hip hop culture an African American version of masculinity. So does that play out differently?
I think there's a very complex relationship between those forms. I mean, there are different variants of masculinity within different ethno-racial communities. And sometimes when we look at something like intersectionality, another big academic buzzword, which is that we don't live our sex, gender, sexuality,
what is
racial
intersectionality?
It's basically this idea that we don't live sex, gender, race, social class, all the social locations that we occupy. We don't live them independently. They all kind of are part of this aggregate that we live simultaneously. So you can't really abstract race, gender, sexuality from the puzzle. They're all part of this whole. And so, yeah, there are ethno-racialized forms of masculinity. There's forms of masculinity associated with certain subcultural communities. But we also, those forms interact with, kind of dominant forms of masculinity create stereotypes about different racial communities as well. So this is how we think, male, masculine people of color should act within this community. So there are stereotypes that community is susceptible to. And then there are also, forms of masculinity that emerge from those communities. And so we're really dealing with a really complex picture. And that's why I prefer to think about it in terms of masculinities. Mm-hmm. Not all manifestations of masculinity are oppressive necessarily. Mm-hmm. There are ways of engaging with masculinity, I think we can look to a lot of different communities. That aren't necessarily as damaging.
Well, it's interesting. There was an article on the website healthline.com that talked about research from Indiana University, basically talking about how conforming closely to traditional notions of masculinity were more likely to have poor mental health outcomes. Mm-hmm. So the more you were the Trumpian, manly man, the worse off you were in terms of mental health. Mm-hmm. And you actually, this article kind of struck a chord with you. No?
I guess I don't recall that you said that earlier.
Oh, okay.
I'm a firm believer, just like with, I can't speak right now, masculinity and femininity. Like, I just believe that it's all energy as a sort, you know what I mean? Like, I learned that in my acting class and stuff like that. It's like the yin and the yang, the positive, negative. Because in any relationship, whether it be gay or bisexual or whatever, trans, hetero, like sometimes the woman can take on the more masculine role, if that's what you want to put it, if I'm just putting a word to it. And the guy can be more feminine, you know what I mean? So it's like interchangeable, but I'm a firm believer in just like the energy aspect of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think looking at it in a more flexible way is really important. I mean, when we talk about masculinity and femininity, I think what we're really talking about in a lot of ways are social constructs, things we've created as humans.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of flexibility. These aren't necessarily like, we're talking about genders in the plural in a sense, or gendered forms of expression, embodiment. And so they're subject to change. We can change these ideas. We can affect these forms of expression as communities and challenge gendered ideals that are oppressive, challenge these hierarchies that are in place. So I don't think it's nice and fixed definitions that we have. And I mean, this is something else that comes up in some of my classes as well, is I'll ask my students, okay, well, how do you define masculinity? What is masculinity for you? What is femininity for you? And there'll always be something that kind of they all agree upon. So there's this amorphous structure to it. And yet there's always something that comes up that is not the same between each student, something unique. And that's because we don't have a fixed definition. Masculinity is going to be different for me than it is for you, for you, for you, for you. It's not a fixed definition.
It's interesting because in this study they examined 11 what they called masculine norms. Yeah. One of them was being a playboy, seeing women as sex objects, conforming to power over women. A third masculine norm closely linked poor mental health to self-reliance. So basically, if you are unwilling to ask for help, it negatively impacts your mental health.
Mm-hmm. Because men aren't supposed to ask for help.
Yeah.
And men don't go to the doctor as much as women do. So is masculinity, as it's defined in the traditional sense, do you believe that it is bad for your mental health?
Yes, I think so, potentially. This is what a lot of scholars, activists, advocates are calling toxic masculinity.
Right.
And it's forms of, traits that are associated with that dominant form of masculinity I was talking about. This idea that men should be unfeeling, then men have to be assertive and aggressive, man the hunter, this ideology. And this contributes to sexism and misogyny, homophobia, transphobia. I mean, it's all interrelated in some ways. And it's part and parcel with this fear of the feminine, of femaleness, and seeing that as inferior. And that gets associated with anything that isn't considered, the opposite of what's considered masculine.
Right. I'm actually curious, Gordon, how this does play out in the Black community, because there is a stereotype that we see of the masculine Black man.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Like I felt it, like to be like, oh man, like I felt like a white guy could do something and they'd be like, oh, he's so white, right? He's so white, he's so white. And like I would do something like, nah, that's wild gay, dude. Like and that's like even like when I play sports, right? Like you spoke about like all the stuff like that would happen in the change room, right? It's not.
Yeah, there was a recent episode where you talked about like goofing around with your bros, and like you kiss on the cheek or whatever.
Oh,
but
you kiss on the cheek?
But
When he's drunk, it's different.
No, but you actually, I didn't realize this while we were shooting that episode, but you had an expression like,
yeah,
what?
I was like,
what? What are you talking about?
That's not going, we're not doing that. No.
Do you find yourself like changing yourself around others to like be like them?
What do you mean by that?
Like you act a different way around different people.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's like, now, I mean, like if you're in a context like this versus like if you were in a group with other Black men, would you... Would how you present as masculine change?
Again, it depends on like the people, right? Like it's just they're all different people, right? Like again, like it could be like some artsy people. I'm not gonna be like I'm not gonna try to like puff out my chest, but like I do notice that like around like other guys, like I'm gonna be like I'm gonna act a different way. Yeah. I am gonna act a different way. It's just
interesting.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is a fascinating topic, and we will talk more. But right now, it's time for Tito's Midpoint.
Okay, so this week we're playing Moot Point. It's gonna be true or false. So you guys just say if you think it's true or false, and it's all about masculinity.
Ooh.
Masculinity.
So here we go.
I won't look.
And the first one, high heels were originally created for men. True or false?
True.
Why?
Horses.
Posture.
Horses.
Horses?
Yeah, they were like to ride horses.
In the 1600s, men wore heels to grip their stirrups while riding.
Oh.
In fact,
Lord.
women only began wearing high heels to look masculine.
BBC Kids.
Really?
Really?
That's interesting.
It soon became a sign of wealth and status.
Wow. Did they ride bareback?
Men spend more time in the shower than women.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
True.
Yes. I love my shower time. I spend like half an hour just singing
And now you've told me about your shower time.
I spend at least half an hour in the shower.
What are you doing there?
Yeah, what's happening there?
Are you like Kramer, like making salads and shit?
No, I
Well, at least washing the lettuce.
I just like hot water being poured on me, so I sit in the shower in the morning, every morning, and I'm just like, wake up.
Tegan, get me some hot water.
Sometimes
so
I
we
fall
can-
asleep in the
Sitting
shower.
down in the shower?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, you fall asleep in the shower. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's morning.
Why don't you just have a bath?
Anyway, it's false. P.S.
I forgot the question.
Yeah, I know. Go, next.
Men don't spend more time in the shower than women.
Yeah.
How did they do a study like that's what I'm curious about is the
Well, it's like
academic.
an
I
average.
guess you'd have to ask people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see whether they lie.
Apparently, men spend an average of 12 minutes in the shower and women spend 14.
It's so boring in there.
Is it?
There's nothing to do.
I get my best thinking done in the shower.
I don't want to think.
Right? I know.
Depends on who's in there with you.
Okay, next. Women are more likely to say I love you before men.
True.
False.
Women are more likely.
False.
I will say true.
I believe
False.
It's false.
Yeah.
Men say it about
Men-
6 weeks earlier than the average woman.
Men are sucks. I fall in love real
Interesting.
fast, so I can attest to that.
Or they just say it because they think that's
They
what they want to
think
hear.
that's gonna get them some.
Is that still a
Crying.
thing?
evil.
I love you.
Crying used to be a sign of masculinity.
True.
I'll say true.
True.
I don't think so.
I can't see that.
It is
either.
now.
You think so?
I don't know. Ask any woman, yeah. Like that's.
They're not gonna say it's masculine. Anyway, it's true.
Lies.
Yeah, it only
Interesting.
changed in the 17th century Europe. Society became influenced by, I can't spell this. I can't read this word, so it doesn't matter.
What's the word?
Spell it out.
Stoicism?
Stoicism.
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 What is that? Like just
Anyway.
Being stoic is being very serious.
It meant aristocratic men were expected to manage their emotions.
Yes, we're being very stoic right now, Ori and I.
indeed.
No. Next. Pink was a man's color. True.
Yes. True. Yes, true.
Yeah.
Still is. Anyways.
On you.
Hey.
That goes for babies, right?
Well, that's
It was
the
like
thing.
the
it's like,
pink was like for the boys. And
Yeah,
the
pinks was
girls,
for.
and the switch.
Yeah, it was only associated with girls in the 1940s.
Really?
Wow.
It was,
BBC Kids, man.
Yeah, man.
'cause-
I'm very learned about these
yeah,
topics.
pink was considered a decided and strong color.
Horrible histories.
Men's hearts beat faster than women's.
False. False.
True.
False.
True.
You're smart today.
Yeah.
Oh.
Women's hearts on average beat faster than men's. This is mostly due to their size difference.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
gotta work
that would
harder,
make
right?
that's the that
Fair
is the way it
enough.
works.
Men spend more of their earned income on their family.
What's that?
False.
Men spend more of their earned income on their family.
False.
I'd say true, probably because there's a wage gap, and that money is
Oh, I'm
needed.
thinking percentage-wise.
Okay.
I'm not thinking
False?
actual.
I'm gonna say true.
True.
Stop changing it. It's false. Yeah, on average around the world, girls and women spend 90% of their earned income on their family, and men spend 30 to 40%.
What assholes?
Wow. Men spend it at the ponies.
Ponies.
This one I thought was cute. The art of brewing beer was pioneered by women.
True.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's true, and I have no facts about it.
So someone told me, so I
wine.
work at a brewery, and somebody
Right.
told me that women make the best brewmasters. For whatever reason, because the aromas
They're
and stuff
better
like that, they're
tasting,
more.
yeah.
When Zoltan Szabo was here, the
Yeah.
sommelier,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
said that
yeah.
women make the best sommeliers because
Right.
of their olfactory senses.
olfactory.
Their smell. Their olfactory senses.
Amazing.
Men account for 65% of lead roles in Hollywood movies.
Oh, it's probably more. It's probably higher.
False, more than that.
Trick
question.
It's a trick question.
Probably higher.
It's 74.4% of
Are
men.
you serious?
Yeah,
That's
girl.
crazy.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, girl. It's not cute. Last one. Being gay used to mean you were more masculine.
True.
I could see that.
Like ancient Greek time.
I'm saying, yeah, true.
It's true.
Do you have any
Is it?
I do. but
Is it
it's
from
not.
like ancient Greece?
Ancient Rome?
Oh, ancient Rome.
Sexuality was defined not by the preference for one sex or another. It was more about social status.
Yeah. There you go.
It was defined by how you had sex, not who you had
Yeah, it
sex
was
with.
like- it was like
As it
one
should
is
be.
like the man, right?
They distinguished between being active or passive, and active meant that you were the penetrator,
Yeah, the top.
and the passive meant you were penetrated.
Yeah. But that still exists today.
Yeah, that's not
That-
uncommon cross-culturally.
Yeah.
To see it defined less
Yeah,
based
as long
on
as you were the
attraction and
active
behavior.
one, that's
Yeah.
what mattered.
Wow. Interesting.
Thank you,
You
Tito.
you learned us things today, Tito.
I also learned a new word.
Stoicism.
Stoicism.
Thank you, Tito, for today's stoic midpoint.
Indubitably.
Indubitably. And that actually, before we get to talking point number 2, Ori, you had something.
Yeah, just to go back to the previous point with like Gordon and asking him if he. No,
Okay.
not that one. About changing how he was with different groups of people. I came from a small town of about 5,000 people, and it's very like closed-minded there, and whatever. And I like slowly baby stepped my way up to moving to Toronto, and I was in construction, and I didn't really. I was kind of like closed off, I would say. I didn't really see a lot of things. Like I didn't know any gay people or anything like that. So I was always like, I was that typical construction worker, honking at girls and stuff
Right.
like that, hooting and hollering at them, like dog calling, like just a complete dick. And I apologize for that. But yeah, since I've like been more cultured, I guess I could say it. I like completely changed my outlook on how things go. So it's nice, and I
Yeah,
think that
it's
everybody
crazy.
should just be open to that.
But it's crazy how certain people will be more open. Like, why does that happen?
Yeah.
Some people just can't get out of their heads.
No, I know. I was just stuck in their ways, right? That's all they know. So it's shitty, but.
Well, here's a way that you can celebrate your openness. Talking point number 2, romper room. So, a Kickstarter campaign has launched for a male romper known as the Romp Him. Not Romper, Romp Him. And if you contribute to the Kickstarter campaign, I think you get your promised one, or they'll send you one, or a prototype or something. Anyway, Aced Design is the company, the Romp Him. Hopefully we can get a picture up on the screen of guys wearing the Romp Him, but it's being criticized for not being masculine and, in fact, quote unquote, infantilizing men. So the question is, would you wear a Romp Him?
I was on the fence.
You know, like when we were talking about like being masculine, like the black communities and stuff like that. Like honestly, like I saw it, right, and I was like, I don't know if we're doing that, right? But then I saw Young Dro wearing it, and I was like, all right, that's kind of hard still. Like, you know, he's got the wild cars behind him. You know what I'm saying? I was like, all right, that's hard. Right?
Pull it off.
Yeah.
But would you wear one, Tito?
Me, no.
No.
Really?
I don't think they're that flattering. Like,
No, it's just like baggy, like you don't want baggy like between your hips. It's like
I think it looks incredibly comfortable.
Yeah, but
And
I mean,
would
it's like
so
it's
totally
either like
wear it.
pajamas or it looks like a onesie without the bottom, like leg sleeves.
Well,
the leg
if
sleeve.
it had the bottom and then you wore it to
I feel like you need like a hat and a lolly.
depending on the party or the bar.
I mean,
a
it's
hat that
cute. It's
spins.
cute on them.
Oh, a beanie?
Yeah.
Like it's cute on them. Like as a group, they look cute, but I
Is
would
this
never wear it.
is this detracting from our masculinity
No.
to wear a romp?
No.
Style is style, whatever.
No, again, it's this idea that anything that gets culturally associated with femininity
Yeah.
detracts, is detracting from masculinity and is taking something away from that precious construct that's given so much value. And I mean, I think people should be able to wear what they want and how they want to wear it. So.
It's interesting. There was an article in the Washington Post. We were talking about, how things are gendered, right? Top and bottom. Even if you're both guys, it's gendered. Who's the man and who's the woman? Well, it turns out, and I never really thought about it like this, that food is also gendered.
Like arugula.
Like arugula. So there was this Washington Post article about gendered food choices. Women actually eat healthier than men based on their food choices, and the food choices that men make are not just bad food choices, but they've been associated with men. According to this research from the university in Amsterdam, energy-dense, spicy, and strongly flavored foods are perceived as masculine foods, while soft and sweet foods are perceived as feminine. Women are choosing foods with more fiber and antioxidants. Men tend to overdo it on saturated fat and empty calories. Is that something that you had noticed in anything that you looked
Yes, actually. There's actually a rich history in anthropology, like across human cultures, of the gendering of food. And even how we eat and how we eat together. And there are some cultural communities where eating is a very intimate act. People of the opposite sex, for instance, might not share food together.
Well, Mike Pence won't have a meal with another woman unless his wife is present.
See, there's an example.
What a gentleman.
classy guy.
But yeah, this idea of meat eating spicy foods as being kind of masculine. I mean, we think back, that has a long history. Like I said, going back to like man the hunter type of mentality. And that meat, there's lots of books that have been written about, for instance, Carol Adams wrote a book called The Sexual Politics of Meat. That this idea that being a vegetarian, being a vegan is feminizing.
Yeah.
And that, you need to be this kind of hunter consuming lots of meat in order to be considered a true man.
Right.
And I think there potentially are some health consequences to that and something to rethinking how we gender food.
I am actually always, if I'm at a restaurant and I see bros at the next table and I see them eating a salad, it actually I go.
Yeah, I never see that.
But when you do
I've never
see
seen
it,
that.
Yeah.
Never seen that?
Even imagining it, I'm like, huh.
I'm imagining a masculine man eating a salad.
But it's the same with drinks too. Like guys with beers are more masculine than somebody who drinks a cocktail that happens to be fruity, even though everyone eats fruit.
I like a good French martini.
Or it's pink.
delicious.
Who cares?
Well,
if it's pink?
interesting. There was also this guy. This article is from The Mirror in the UK. Man with a body to die for eats one 4,000 calorie meal every night at 2 a.m.
Me,
And he's so full that he can't have sex. But
not me.
What a great.
there's all these pictures of him, and he's got a good body, and he has all these followers on
Let me
social
see.
media. He's from Paramus, New Jersey. Blake Horton is his name. I
Why
mean,
so late?
That is so unhealthy, isn't it?
What does he eat?
well, there's a picture of him
Cheetos.
with Cheetos and stuff, and hopefully we can get
Tacos.
some
He's
of
eating a
the.
giant pizza covered in marshmallow fruity pebbles. Who does that? That doesn't even sound good.
How is he so fit? Does he work out?
I mean, he works
I guess he
out,
would
but
have to,
it's this idea of promoting eating manly foods to look manly. But yet, if you really think about, I mean, who knows how much of this is, it's just going by his social media stuff. But
amazing.
it's sort of, to me, it was an extreme version of what happens when you gender food. Well, although I don't know about the Fruity Pebbles. I don't know how masculine that is.
But
But
I agree with you, and I think we even have to question. I mean, what does it mean to look
Ridiculous.
manly?
Yeah.
Like, why do we have to have certain body types in order to be considered manly and masculine? And I mean, there's lots of research about how we even gender body fat. You know, like we consider men who are have larger bodies to be considered more effeminate, soft, cushy. You know, there's again
big
a kind
teddy
of
bear
yeah,
type of
there's
thing.
kind of
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
gendering that
Well,
goes
but
along with
didn't-
this as well.
We need to wrap up, but didn't the bear community in the gay community kind of reclaim that and
And
masculinize
I
it?
think they're
The bear community?
Because they're hairier and it's more masculine.
Right, but bigger guys.
I think there are attempts to change the gendering of that. I think the bear community might be a good
No.
example of that.
Bears are
Interesting.
bigger
Okay, so
gay
there's a question
men.
about what a bear
I
is.
didn't know that. I thought you meant
Okay,
like
okay.
animals.
Define what a bear is.
It is a hairy, bigger gay man.
Okay.
And then there are otters that are
What?
skinnier, furry gay
Are you
men.
serious?
And
Okay,
otter-
this is a topic for a
This is
whole other
hilarious.
show.
There are many other
This is
animals.
not on
I was like,
BBC
how
already.
did you
Many
find out
categories.
like about the bear
An
community?
otter?
Like, how do you know that?
Oh, it's a
Like, did
thing.
you
It's
interview
just
them
out
or
there.
something?
Okay, we'll talk about bears next time. But anyway, endpoints. Tito,
Bob of the week this week is
do you have 4 again?
Margaret. She's from Poland, and it's called What You Do. I just need to make sure I didn't get it wrong. What is so good, and the video is like a first-person shooter video game. It's really cool.
Nice.
Oh, cool. Of course, I'm going to remind you, our live season finale, which is coming up in a couple of weeks as part of Nuit Rose, which is a festival of queer art and performance, Saturday, June 17th, starting at 7 p.m. We will be at the 519 Community Center, 519 Church Street, in the Church Wellesley Village in Toronto. More details to come. Also, I was just in New York. I was just in New York to take part to be a guest on the late live show at night with Dylan Fisher on Facebook. If you missed it on June 5th, you can still go to their Facebook page and check it out. But also, I was on an episode of a podcast called Unorthodox, which is sort of an unorthodox way of looking at the Jewish community. So go on iTunes and look for the Unorthodox podcast and look for the episode with me. It should be up on Thursday, June 8th, depending on when you're watching this show. So check out the live late show at night with Dylan Fisher on Facebook. Check out Unorthodox on iTunes. Of course, we're on iTunes.
Get out.
We are. The audio podcast is on iTunes. Check us out there. Of course, we are also on Reverie, the world's largest LGBTQ online streaming service. Check us out there at Reverie and all their content at reverie.tv. Our crowdfunding site is on Patreon, patreon.com/thepointguys. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Very important. Costs you nothing. Helps us greatly
not doing that anymore.
with YouTube. Yeah, the button is different now. Tito knows.
Still
What's
gonna
with
do
the
this.
button?
There's no more annotations on YouTube.
Okay, I have no idea what that means.
I don't even know what that means.
So,
Why?
hashtag how old is
You
Fred?
can't click it. You can do the cards.
Yeah, I don't know. But there is a button somewhere below our screen. Press that button. Of course, our website for all things The Point, thepointguys.net. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff as well. What?
Nothing.
Are you making fun of me?
No,
Never.
he was.
I wasn't.
Oh, great.
I would never.
We have a new show every Tuesday. Thank you, Kevin Nixon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we will see you next, everybody. See you next Tuesday on The Point.
It didn't give us time for that.